favorite movie and why, because I love leading with that.
Movies I'm willing to watch over and over again on repeat. And there's 3. Braveheart, Italian Job. I just lost the third. Boondock Saints. Those 3 movies I would literally watch on loop because there's so many elements I just think are amazing. Italian Job is not the best movie, but it was at a formative time in my life where it was just enough love of women and cars that it just all fit together.
Put Mini Coopers on the map.
Exactly, dude. I've owned 2 Mini Coopers because of that movie.
Me too.
Have you? That's awesome. So absolutely love those, including the original Mini Cooper, which my friend owned, but I borrowed, and we put it, I didn't go to college, but my ex did. We put his Mini Cooper on the stage in the concert hall, in the dean's office, on top of the windows of the cafeteria. It was only 800 pounds. So like 6 guys could move this thing anywhere. It's fantastic.
Welcome to the On the Edge podcast with your host, Scott Groves. Hey, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? I am here with my front row dad friend, Eric Farewell, and I wish we were doing this podcast in person because there would be a lot more booze and probably smoking and other fun stuff like that. But Eric is one of the more fascinating guys that I have met in front row dads, and it's mostly because of the businesses that he runs from afar and has found a way to exit himself out of the day-to-day. And I don't even quite know what Eric does because they have like a flying company and an airplane racing business and a YouTube channel with people doing base jumps and flying and doing flips with these fans behind them. And it's all the crazy shit that you see on like, Red Bull commercials that you're like, no normal person does that. And then I met Eric and I'm like, oh, he's kind of a normal person and he does all of this crazy stuff. So I want to get all into the businesses and I want to get into like all the things that you've accomplished and then exited the businesses and not have to be there for the day-to-day. Like you to me are kind of like Willy Wonka. You get to work on all this super fun stuff and to you it doesn't seem to be like a job. But can you tell me, first of all, the flying, the YouTube channel, like what do you do, Eric?
Oh man, as little as possible, I think is the most direct answer I can give you. I have been enamored with aviation my entire life. My grandfather flew in World War II. My uncle flew for United for darn close to 40 years. My cousins fly. My mom celebrated her 16th birthday, and I was born 100 yards from a runway. So I literally have had flying in my blood. I will never forget my first flight at 3 years old, and then discovering ultralight aviation when I was 7 and realizing that I could fly before I was 16. So I did the logical thing and I went to work 40 plus hours a week at my grandparents' restaurant at 7 years old. But throughout my life, aviation was kind of the cornerstone of what made me feel like me. And, you and I have done a lot of the deeper work with Front Row Dads and other groups. And realistically, flying was the place where I felt safest because I was in total control. I had a pretty challenging childhood and flying made me safer. And maybe give me a place to be me. So I knew that aviation was always going to be a part of my life. And it's much less so today than it was because I don't have to fly 300 hours a year to feel safe and comfortable in my life. But yeah, it definitely drove me forward. So what do I do?
Just real quick, I've seen some of the things you've done with, what do they call that where you have like the parachute above you and the fan behind you?
Paramotor.
Okay, so we're going to put in some B-roll right now of what paramotor is, because if anybody sees somebody doing paramotor, the last word that would come to mind is safe. It looks like the most dangerous shit ever. Like you basically just strapped a big industrial strength fan to your back and you've got some little tiny aerobatic parachute and you're like, I don't know, 300 feet off the ground doing loops and flips. And I called you because there was a guy in the desert here behind my house doing it. I'm like, this guy's going to fucking crash, man. And he's like, nah, he's fine. He knows what he's doing. I'm like, no, really. I feel like I'm watching somebody about to die. So can you just tell me what is it called again?
So it's called a paramotor or a powered paraglider.
How is that safe? It looks terrifying.
Believe it or not, it's actually the safest form of personal flight. It's safer than private planes. All right. It is what you make it. Now, if you're doing aerobatics at 300 feet, you are enhancing your risk profile, right? But statistically safer than riding a motorcycle, or at least as safe as riding a motorcycle. And you don't have to really worry about other, cars when you're flying, unless you're really daring. But yeah, it's basically a 25 horsepower motor you strap to your back and you run into the sky. And you can fly for 3 hours, 4 hours. You've got a speed of anywhere from 30 miles an hour up to about 55 miles an hour. Some of them are fully aerobatic. It's not what you would start with. You'd get a lot of experience first. And I got into those almost 12 years ago. Actually, it's 12 years ago next month. And we just had our first kid, and airplanes are expensive. I don't know if anyone told you that, but they are expensive to operate. And the paramotor is like $8 an hour. And you could buy one for 12 grand, and the training is 4,000. So it's this very affordable path to flight. And quite frankly, doing 30 miles an hour in a paramotor 6 inches off the ground feels faster than driving a race car at 180. And I've done both a lot. So it's pretty awesome.
All right. So for 12 grand, I can buy a paramotor. One of your companies, one of your mini companies, I'm finding out every day you have more and more. One of your mini companies trains people on how to like get in the air. So if I was like, hey, I just want to be able to go from my sidewalk in front of my house, because we're in like a non-regulated area, and just take off with this fucking paramotor contraption. How much would it be to buy the thing to get quality training from you and actually be able to like take off and just fly over Las Vegas?
So training's less than 4 grand. It takes about 2 weeks, 10 to 12 days. But most of our students stay for 14, just in case there's weather, that kind of thing. We train about 300 people a year in Central Florida. We have 2 locations there. We had a location that I think we're going to close this year in Nashville. And then we're obviously exploring opening other locations as well. So we've been acquiring other companies. Out the door total, let's call it anywhere from 10 to 18,000, depending on if you buy new, buy used, all that stuff. So it's very affordable, and it's a heck of a lot of fun, man. It's that for a lot of people, it's the first time they do something superhuman that allows them to really get in touch with their inner child, really get in touch with, something that's bigger than themselves. And we've had people land. My favorite is this big burly mountain man from Montana landed from his first flight, and he's weeping, and he says to me, "I just stole moments from heaven." I'm like, that's what it feels like. It is a different kind of experience. It's something that, we've had C-suites from different companies come in and learn to fly together. And the brotherhood that's built there, the camaraderie of going through something it's really difficult. Like, it looks easy on the website and videos you guys just watched. Like, it looks simple. The reality is it's extremely physically demanding and mentally draining. There's 30 hours of ground school in 2 weeks, right? Like, there's a lot to learn. So when you accomplish it, it's a high like no other. People say it's like going through boot camp and summer camp at the same time. So it's a lot of fun. That's been my primary business now for 11 years, and had the opportunity to change over 2,300 people's lives, helping them overcome their fears and be present with who they really are through flight.
And just for some context, like, obviously you got to know some FAA regulations, right? I'm sure I can't just fly over the, LAX or the Las Vegas airport, probably a little dangerous.
Or the strip,
Or the strip, yeah. So like, how low can you go? How high can you go? Like, where's like a fun cruising altitude? Because like, I could go over Lake Mead. If I was in a aircraft of some type, I could be from my house to over Lake Mead in, I don't know, 5 minutes, and down in LA, I could be from my house to over the Hollywood sign in like 10 minutes. So where do people normally cruise when they get into this stuff?
So we don't fly over open air assemblies of people or congested area, which is not really a defined term by the FAA. There is some case law that defines it, but we legally fly from 0 to 18,000 feet most places in the U.S.
18,000? Wait, no. How high is like a real like commercial airline?
They usually cruise between 32,000 and 41,000 feet.
Oh, okay. So you're only like halfway to where a plane is.
Only like halfway as high as Everest.
That's terrifying. Is it like, this is just so foreign to me. I have so many questions. Like, how cold does it get? What do you do when you have to pee? Like, how much do you have to wear? Like, I mean, I could talk about this for 10 hours just trying to learn more about, paramotoring, which
this is my most boring business. So I don't know. Like, it's going to be a very, very interesting podcast.
So, all right, just give me some highlights on like some cool stuff that you've done paramotoring.
Oh man, some cool things I've done. I have been really honored. In 2016, we launched the first paramotor aerobatic team in the US, and we got to fly at the world's largest air show in front of like 700,000 people. So that was super, super cool. Really incredible experience. I was announcing, and I'm like watching the crowd stand up. And one of our pilots does what's called an infinity tumble, which is where you actually fly the paraglider backwards and you do backflips. And it's kind of intense. It's like 8 Gs at the top, 8 Gs at the bottom. And watching the whole crowd just go, was one of the coolest moments ever, because everyone watched us walk out and they're like, what the hell? Like, this is going to be the dumbest air show act ever. And then we freaked everybody out. They loved it. Flying, my favorite place to fly in the world. I've flown in around 40 states and I think 13 or 14 countries, and flying in Czech Republic, which, by the way, they have the coolest laws there. You can fly over downtown Prague as long as you're away from the airport, you're 1,000 feet. But we would fly and cross these incredible valleys up over the mountains, drop down, flying over castles, and then land in like the backyard of the winery.
Wow.
Do nothing but eat and drink all night long, pass out in their little hostel, wake up in the morning, take back off in the backyard of the winery, and fly 3 hours back to the Russian military base that we were working out of. I've done incredible things with these, just absolutely incredible views and vistas and things that will live in my heart forever, because I get to see a different level of freedom than almost anyone else can. I say it's the ultimate ATV. Like, you get to take off and explore a field and then look over the next ridge and go, oh, what's that over there? Pop up high, drop over the next thing. There's nothing like it. I've done a lot of crazy cool things in my life. Paramotoring is hands down the most visceral. I mean, aside from making kids, right? Like, it's pretty much the most visceral experience you'll ever have.
And you can be up there for 2-3 hours on a tank of gas and be totally confident.
Sometimes longer. If you're a lighter pilot flying a smaller engine, they only burn a couple of liters an hour, and so you have a 5-gallon gas tank. You can go for a really long time.
That's wild, man. Okay, have you had any close calls? Have you had some oh shit moments that made you second think whether or not you want, or second guess whether or not you wanted to be putting any more hours up on one of these things?
Yes and no. I've been a test pilot since I was 17 years old. And I broke my back the first time 2 weeks before my 18th birthday in an airplane crash. And then 10 years later, I broke my back again in a paramotor crash, again, test flying a unit. And I told my wife as we're on the way to the hospital, I'm like, don't worry, I'll never fly again. And she goes, if you don't fly, you're not the man I married. And it's, really a testament to her grit and who she is. But no, I think I will always fly. There's something, like when I got married, I told her I will always smoke cigars, I will always gamble, and I'll never make the bed. I guess Fair. Flying is one of those elements. I don't even really smoke cigars anymore, and I've made the bet a few times in the last 15 years,
I like the transparency. My ex-wife, who is a lovely human being, and I'm sure there's no chance she's watching this podcast, but she's an amazing person. One thing that was kind of weird is, like, a year into our marriage, she was like, oh, you really do smoke a lot of cigars. I'm like, this is not new information. You literally met me smoking a cigar after a wedding, and then, like, I smoked cigars probably every single time we saw each other after that. And I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, is this just an excuse to divorce me? Because, like, this is not new information. Like, I smoke a lot of cigars. We'll probably be able to show, if we do this podcast for like 10 years, we'll be able to show the progression of how much shittier my voice gets over the next 10 years. I get all groggy from the cigars.
Husky
yes,
voice.
Yes.
Yeah. No. It's funny. I had a cigar review website way back before that was cool. It was called theburnnotice.com, right around the time that the Burn Notice TV show was on. And so we got tons of traffic for people going to the wrong website, and I got tons of free cigars. So I was happy.
Nice. So you mentioned that the Paramotor company is your least interesting business, which I don't know if I believe. So give me a rundown of all the other businesses you're invested in, you're helping run, you founded, and then handed off to like a real CEO. What's your, tell me where you're at now. And then I want to get to the origin story.
Man, where am I now? Right now, the primary business is Aviator Paramotor. Ancillary to that, we have Limitless Paramotors, which is actually a design and manufacturing company. We partner with a welder out of Spain, and we build and assemble these frames in the US. We actually build our own frames. They're titanium. They're freaking awesome. Took a lot of time to get them built out, and now I'm truly proud of that business and what it's doing.
So this is the manufacturing side of paramotors.
Correct.
And I got to imagine that's a pretty niche field. Like, are there like 3 of you or 2 of you or 20 of you?
No, there's like probably 50 of them.
Oh, shit. Okay. So this is a bigger sport than I would have thought.
Yeah. In the US, there's about 5,000 active pilots, and worldwide, there's many, many more. This is in Europe and Asia. This is a very large sport. It's not, it really has been picking up here, I would say, over the last decade, largely due to the marketing push, because my background is in marketing. So when I came into this business, it was just like, how do we get this in front of everyone? That's why we had an air show team. That's why we've done more news articles than you can imagine, because to this day, I think our biggest challenge in that business is people don't know the sport exists. My CEO of that business is like, his big dream is he wants a Super Bowl commercial with a paramotor. Mm-hmm. I told him to dream bigger. He needs to have like Travis Kelce flying the paramotor, carrying Taylor Swift. But it's like,
No,
It's a
what
perfect.
you need this is like a stunt montage on like a Mission Impossible movie where Tom Cruise paramotors like, over the Great Wall of China and he's avoiding spies and stuff. Like when you explained to me what you did, I think this was a year ago at the Colorado retreat or something, I was like, there's no way. This guy does not do this for a living. And then you started showing me the YouTube channel. I was like, holy shit, this guy Eric, who's like so calm, cool, and collective, is the most adventurous guy I know. And then my immediate thought was, why has Tom Cruise or Jason Bourne series or something not done a paramotor like stunt, routine?
They've done it in Baywatch back in the 90s. They did this, right?
Well, that's because David Hasselhoff is cool as fuck.
And he actually flew it, like actually legitimately flew one in Baywatch. So there's a lot of legacy media that's out there, and it's still a growing sport. We'll train, like I said, about 300 people each year, and that can grow. We definitely have the scalability. The other aspect of that business that I don't usually talk about is there's a pretty significant DoD impact, right? Mm-hmm. So we have our biggest clients, the military, and we do a lot of research and development for applications of new technology that they aren't even considering yet, because 10 years ago these things would do 30 miles an hour and they were heavy, and now they're capable of 60 miles an hour and they're light, and there's just, the technology's come so far. It's really revolutionary, and it's been a lot of fun to be a part of. But the other business I haven't mentioned yet is called National Stol, STOL, and it's a national racing series. We're actually building our own new motorsport. I bought the company with my wife in 2022, and it's really a media company. I mean, we have these events. We have 10 events and then a championship this year. And last year we had 8 events, and we had, I think it was 56 million people watched our videos. So we've got 56 million viewers.
Did you create a business just to like monetize YouTube revenue?
Of course.
Brilliant.
Of course, and that's also how we built our Paramotor business. Our number one marketing source is YouTube. Like 10 to 1, we've never advertised that business. It's all been YouTube. How can we share our story to inspire people to understand what we do, what we believe in, and then people want to come and join us, which has been awesome.
So National Stol, I've seen a couple of these videos. These are the ultralight planes, like single motor planes that can, I mean, they look like old World War II planes, but they can take off in like 10 feet, 20 feet, something like that.
So we have different classes. One of our pilots, Brandon Corn, Brandon's from Hearn, Texas, just down the road from me here. And he actually has a 6-place single engine, big, heavy, like I think it's 3,500 pounds full, right? Like it's a big, heavy airplane that he rips off the ground at under 100 feet. So we have these different classes. Our unlimited category, of course, is just silliness. I mean, they take an airplane that was designed around a 50 or 80 horsepower motor, cram 450 horsepower into it, add 150 horsepower shot of nitrous, and they're off the ground in 4 to 6 feet. It is crazy. And then they're stopping in less than 20. It's wild to watch.
So this is a fully functional plane that can take off.
2 seats.
That can take off with 4 feet of runway.
I think his best was, we scored it as 6 feet. And we went back to the tape. He has all of our limited series guys have to put a tape on their tire, and then we measure how far the rotation is. And according to him, 4.5 feet was his actual takeoff distance. And there's about 15 miles an hour wind on the nose, so it wasn't just the airplane.
Holy cow.
Really, really wild to watch. A lot of fun. And we have fans all over the country, so we get to go out and go to these events live. My son gets to come with me. He's one of our filmmakers at now 12 years old, and it's an incredible community of people and a great advertising resource for any company who wants to target a 35 to 65-year-old male demographic. We have 60 million and growing at like an insane speed. I expect we'll probably be around 100 million viewers this year.
So just for context, if somebody's thinking right now of like the standard kind of Cessna plane that you would see at a private airport, how many horsepower are in that, and how long of a runway do they need to take off? If you're just buying like a $50,000, private party Cessna, what's the horsepower in the runway versus what your guy just did?
So the majority of those Cessnas in the average hands are 150, 160 horsepower, maybe 180, and they'll be getting off the ground in 800 feet, maybe 1,200 feet. We do have those guys like Brandon Corn in his Cessna 205. He has, I believe it's 260 horsepower, and he's getting off the ground at 100 feet, because it really is more about the pilot and the style of which they're flying the airplane. So really staggering to watch, and it makes them safer pilots because they learn where they can put it down. The smaller the patch, they lose an engine, they know what to do, right? And so we're enhancing pilot safety, inspiring the next generation of aviators, people starting to see that flying is accessible. It doesn't have to be a rich man sport. I mean, we've got a guy, I love talking about Micah. Micah is from Minnesota. He's a heavy equipment operator, and he bought a Cessna 170, a 1946 or 47 Cessna 170 in a barn. Spent 2 years putting it together when he was like 17 years old. Got it all signed off by an MPIA, built this airplane, and started competing in it. And he actually won his category last season, beating out his mentor, who's flying the same kind of airplane. Like fist fights happening. It's just a blast to watch.
And what are they competing for? Are they competing for like speed, aerobatics? Like what distance, is the competition?
Distance. So it's how far you take off, how far you land. You have a line on the field, you line up on the line, you take off. We measure the distance between the time you get off the ground and the time after the line you touch down, how quickly you can stop. So it's judged like golf, right? So our unlimited category, these guys are just crazy. They're getting combined scores of like 27, 34, right? And there's different ways of going about it. We have one guy who takes off at about 20 feet, 25 feet at best, but he can land in 6 to 10, like a third of his airplane distance, because he's got this super, super, super slow plane. So it's really fun to watch. And like, that's why we've had such success with YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, is our viewers, whereas like my Paramotor channel, we have a great channel. We have great viewership, about 85,000 subscribers, and it's driven tens of millions in revenue. But we have maybe 35% of the video watched, right? They'll watch 35% and sign off and go do something else. This channel, it's 180% average.
So people watch it over and over and over again.
1.8 times per video, because they're like, what the heck did I just watch? Which is perfect. It's fantastic for us.
That is wild, man. What other businesses are you currently involved in, or have you handed off to other competent people?
Oh man, there's been so many over the years. Currently, that's about it. I'm been consulting for several different companies over the last couple of years. And I'm starting to do more of that. I woke up during COVID and kind of had this realization of like, what is success to me? I've got a buddy, and he's hyper successful. The guy's net worth is like $600 million, right? He's got the badass airplanes. He's got the cool stories, all the extra homes, and he is never going to be happy until he has $1 billion in his bank account. And I could care less about adding another $1 million to my bank account if it means I'm not with my wife, not with my kids. And Aviator was, 8 years of sometimes 5:30 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. Didn't see the kids for weeks at a time, and for me, success was having a relationship with my wife that matters, that we actually like each other, and having a relationship with my kids that we actually still communicate when they're my age, right? So stepping away from operations, while difficult, was really important to me. And so we kept building systems and trying to step away and failing, and building systems and trying to step away and failing, and hiring more people and failing. And eventually I just kind of cold turkeyed it. And over time, the team figured out that they could be a team without me. I didn't have to answer all the questions. And they are just the most incredible group of people. Now, mind you, we've hired over 90% of our employees are former students. So they go through the course, and there's actually 2 at my shop right now who went through the course 2 months ago and just never left. They're like, this is the best.
They just quit their job. They're like, this is what I want to do.
They're like, I'm going to intern. I'm going to get this job. I'm going to work for you. And we've had several like that. I think probably 4 of our instructors that have come through that just never left. One of them was an engineering student, great guy. He came into my office on, I think, day 4 or day 5 of his training. He says, I want to do this. So, okay. He moved onto my couch in my office for 6 months.
I like this guy.
Work-life balance, right? But he became a phenomenal instructor, great pilot, and a good guy, So it's a neat world.
Shout out to Scuba Tony down in Cozumel. If you're ever in Cozumel and you need to go diving, look up Scuba Tony. Scuba Tony is a friend of a friend who was an LA County sheriff working under like my second father, my best friend's father. He was our Boy Scout leader. And I was getting ready to go to Mexico, and my second dad, Bob Nims, he's like, hey man, check out Scuba Tony when you're in Cozumel. I'm like, who's Scuba Tony? He's like, well, he was about 8 or 9 years into the sheriff's department, fell in love with scuba diving, used all of his vacation time to scuba dive in like 10 different countries. And one day calls me, he's like, hey man, I'm not coming back. I called my mom, told her to sell the house. I'm resigning from the sheriff's department. I just love diving in Cozumel so much. I'm staying down there. So he stayed down there. He got his dual citizenship. He learned the language. He opened a business there. And he loved scuba diving more than he loved, policing degenerates, which is probably a good trade.
Shocking. Totally shocking.
Yeah, shocking. And then, talk about living your best life. He's done, what's the thing where you're on is it a kiteboard where you're surfing and you got a big kite?
Yeah.
So he does
Super
that.
fun.
He's run a bunch of ultra marathons, Ironmans. Like, he's just living his best life because he found a way to monetize his passion. And that's kind of where I wanted to go with you. When I think of the average, surf bum or jiu-jitsu practitioner who's super passionate, or the guy who falls in love with aviation at 16, 17 years old, I'm thinking of that guy that did Free Solo. That's the rock climbing guy. There's just all these rock climbing bums that live in their trailer and they climb because that's their passion. But it's very rare that those people also turn into people that have enough business chops to monetize their passion. It's like there's kind of a divergent thought process where it's like, oh, well, do what you love and you'll never feel like you worked a day in your life. And it's like, hey, no, go do what you're good at, make a bunch of money, and then spend your free time doing what you love. So how do you go from, I've got this passion for aviation, to oh, I've got the business chops, because I kind of know a little bit about your financial background. I've got the business chops to grow real businesses, have financial security for my family, maybe have some exits, grow some other stuff. A lot of times those don't go hand in hand, right? I picture the guy living in his van, rock climbing. He's got a really great life. It's adventurous. It seems super romantic. And he's also dead broke.
Yeah. So it's very, very common. I think that there's a lot of different elements that play to this. And the first element is, I think that every person that's in business, if you are doing something you're not passionate about, if you're going to a W-2 job right now that you don't love, you're literally giving away your life. You're giving away the only time you have. For what? Right? For what? For what purpose? To what end? To make your boss rich? To make the world better in some way that you're miserable? That doesn't make the world better. So I've been very blessed my whole life. I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs, a very broke family of entrepreneurs, I should be clear. That my parents ran what they called a business tree. It was a ministry business. That's what they called it. It was mainly just an excuse for them not to make any damn money or save for retirement. But they took me, I was 13. I went to my first internet marketing conference. And it was a big seminar. We were in San Francisco. Armin Morin put this on, and it was Frank Kern's there before Frank Kern became the Southern California beach bum. He was a Georgia mountain hick, which I love to death. I got to know him and I was blown away by what he did, making ebooks and selling them. And I just wanted to learn from these guys. And at 13 years old, I had enough maturity to know that I didn't know what I didn't know. And I couldn't bring these guys a lot of value, but I could bring them coffee every time they needed it. I could carry their briefcase. I could make sure the computer was set up for their speeches. And so I latched on to Alex Mondosian at 13. And I just said, Alex, I want to learn everything you know. And at that point, he had a very successful business called the Ask Method, which now, of course, we know Ryan Levesque has the very similar title. And Alex was killing it. He was selling from stage, closing 40% of the room. And I wanted to learn what he knew because I was already selling airplanes on this new thing called the internet, right? So I already had some baseline of...
Wait, no, back up. At 13, you were selling airplanes on the internet?
I was. So
this can't be you're talking about your parents being broke. This is almost like nature versus nurture, that you were just born to be an entrepreneur. You must have some intrinsic skill set, or, can you point to, my parents were broke, I started selling lemonade on the corner at 7, or something is not, something connecting.
Shoes at 5.
Okay.
Yeah, shining shoes at 5 at my grandparents' restaurant. The heart of it was that I was really, really, really hungry. I wanted things that were way beyond what my family could ever afford. There was never an option of having my parents buy me a car, pay my insurance, pay for my fuel. There was never an option to have my parents pay for my college. There was never an option for any of those things to be a possibility. The option was I got wealthy so I could take care of them or else. That was it. And I guess I had a pretty good relationship with money from an early age because I just realized if I take care of people, if I serve them well enough, they pay me more. I was a bellhop. I worked in the restaurant. I was a tour guide. We had a soup cannery that the soups went to the moon on Apollo 15, 16 and Soyuz. So we had this crazy things. And when an 8-year-old kid takes you on a tour of a soup cannery, which is like 1,800 OSHA violations, I'm confident of, but I got paid. I took a bus full of old ladies on a tour of the soup cannery, and I tell great stories, and I get paid extra money. So I learned the value of storytelling really early. And at 13, I bought that first airplane tail kit, and I was really excited about building this airplane. And fun fact, I'm ADHD, and ADHD kids are not designed to do engineering projects. It's just really difficult for us. So I put it up for sale on this new thing called the internet, which I had some knowledge of, some understanding of, like early eBay, that kind of thing. And it sold within a couple of weeks. And the guy I bought it from, it's like, Eric, I have a hangar full of airplanes. I'll give you 10% if you help me sell them. So I said, make it 20, because I guess I was a good negotiator once upon a time in my life. And he did. And so I went on to sell over 200 airplanes over the next 5 years.
At 13 years old.
At 13, yeah. So it's kind of a wild start, but that's what allowed me to drop out of high school. I was a homeschool kid that dropped out at 16. I had my first employee just before my 16th birthday. I hired an A&P mechanic to help me build airplanes. And that really, my goal was still at that point, I still wanted to go to the Air Force Academy, and I wanted to fly jets. That was the dream. I want to be like my grandfather. And 2 weeks before my 18th birthday, I had the aircraft accident, and I broke 5 vertebrae and lost 80% of my memory. And the Air Force said, you'll never fly. And I said, you're not getting 14 years of my life. And that set me on a course that took me all over the country and around the world speaking. I had that marketing world kind of enveloped me very quickly. And up until I was 23, almost 24, that was my life, was teaching people marketing, trying to build something from it. And eventually I got burned out as heck, because none of it was real. Like it's all like, marketing is like, the internet marketing community in general is just, there's so many people out there who have experienced some level of success, and then they spend all their time trying to get other people to pay them to teach them how they did it. And the people who are paying, a lot of the times, it's people who are using their last credit card to buy a little bit more hope, and then they never do anything with the hope. I had a course that was $25,000, and this woman bought it and literally opened one module, read 2% of the module, and then never did anything else with it, and like tried to get a refund from me a year and a half, 2 years later. And I was like, well, first off, you bought this at a conference, so half the money goes to the promoter. You have to go to the promoter because he processed your credit card. I didn't. And like, I just felt so much shame and so much guilt, because you can't make someone do hard work.
Right.
I even put in my speech, when I used to do that world, in my speech, it was like, internet marketing is the only business in the world where you work 95 hours a week to make money while you sleep. Because I don't care what business you're in. If you're selling mortgages, if you're selling houses, it doesn't matter what your business you're in. If you actually want success, you absolutely can attain a level like where I am today, where it's Friday. I think I've worked on actual business stuff an hour this week. Yeah, maybe.
So fuck you. No, I'm just kidding.
Right?
I love you, dude.
You can't get there. You can't get there. But I grinded for 20 years.
Right.
For 20 years, I worked 90 hours a week or more. I was willing to put in that effort. And then I was able to discover what success really meant to me, and able to actually deliver on that by giving up. And I took a haircut. I took a 30% profit haircut to not be in my office. Worth it, brother. Worth it. Right?
Yeah, totally worth it.
Sorry, I went on a monologue there.
No, man. I mean, this is the good stuff. I mean, there was clearly something within you. It's funny. When we started the coaching business and Chris started working for me, because, I don't know, I think he got laid off at a hotel or something, and he really needed a job, and I really needed somebody who's good at figuring out systems that I don't have the energy to do. He came to me. I remember this very distinctly. He came to me. He's like, hey, man, to be clear, I need the job, so I don't care. But is coaching a scam? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I'm going to do whatever you ask me to do because I need the job. But like, is this whole coaching thing, like, is it like a scam? Like, I've never been in coaching. I'm like, well, yeah, you work in like hotel management and stuff. Like, there's probably not a lot of coaching programs. Yes, coaching can absolutely help. But there was some truth to what he was saying, because you and I have run in a couple crowds where, the guy goes from selling, gold to crypto to solar packages to whatever, because he knows the marketing system to make people say yes, but he doesn't believe in any of the shit he's selling. As a matter of fact, we have some people we can talk about off air who I think are complete fucking snake charmers, and and they're wildly successful. And I struggle with that sometimes, where it's like, man, if I cared less about my coaching clients, I could make more money by becoming a better coaching marketer. But that's just not in alignment with who I want to be.
Well, I think there's two elements to look at there. One, once you know the systems, you can do it anywhere, right? You talk to all these very wealthy people who you take away their money and they're back to making millions of dollars a week because they know the systems, right? The reality is that the more you know and the more you make, the different games you play that are completely outside of what the normal, like 9-to-5er who's making minimum wage even understands.
Mm-hmm.
Like in 2018, I'd done about $4 million in revenue with the Paramotor business that year. And one of my mentors had done closer to $1 billion. And he paid less in taxes than I did.
Holy shit.
And I was like, I'm doing it wrong. Like, I thought I was playing the game right. Like, you know, I'm investing, I'm donating to people. I've got all these different places and things are working great. And I paid like 4 times the amount of taxes he did. Right. Because they're playing a different game. But that said, to go back to the coaching thing, something I've discovered that's really interesting is you can't have a successful business without having passion for it.
Right.
Because you'll burn out. Hard stop. You're going to burn out. You're going to burn out anyway. If you have a hard enough passion that you really believe in what you're doing, it will take you longer to burn out and you'll get back from burnout faster. You're still going to burn out. But most importantly, whatever you're doing has to make the world a better place.
Yep.
Has to have an element of it that changes who people are because they interacted with you for the better. And there's plenty of people out there, 1 in 6 is a sociopath, right? So if you have 1 in 6 could be a sociopath, maybe those are all the bad coaches out there, all the bad marketers out there, because the reality is it's easy to take money for people to better yourself if you don't care about them.
Right.
But if you really care about people, like I have this consulting practice, I'm in the very fringes of starting. I'm like, look, I won't even talk to, I don't even want to have a conversation unless they're doing $1 million in EBITDA because they're not ready for me. They're not ready to walk away from their business. They're not ready to make the investments into their team and to take the time to actually examine their systems to really, it's hard work. If you don't have $1 million in EBITDA, you can't afford it. Keep grinding, get there, and you'll be able to afford it. Because with $1 million in EBITDA, it might take you 2 to 3 years to get out of your business, right? If you've got 5 million in EBITDA, we can get you out of your business most likely in 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
It's going to be more expensive, but you can do it, right? It's understanding that you have to create, like you and I, as people who are trying to offer a service or bring good into the world, we have to have such strong ethics and clear moral boundaries that if we don't, we're no better than a snake oil salesman, right?
Right.
Luckily, you've been a successful, mortgage broker. I've been a successful entrepreneur in my own ways. Like we have track record that shows that we do what we say. But even then, you have to be so cautious that you get the right person in that seat. Because if it's someone who's coming to you for coaching, it's their last dollar, maybe pay the rent.
Yeah. Right. It's really interesting though. Here's another dilemma as a coach, right? This is in my book, which we've actually moved a lot of copies of my book. And I put this out there publicly all the time, Eric. And I'm like, hey, if you're a loan officer and you're really struggling and you're serious about coaching, send me the last 2 months of your bank statement and your credit card. And if you're not wasting, my entry-level coaching is $388 a month. If you're not wasting $400 on 7-Eleven, cigarettes, cigars, booze, fast food, like if you're really in dire straits, I will coach you for free for as long as it takes you to get your production back to where you can afford to pay for a coach. In 7 years since my book came out, I've had 2 people do that. And both of them, I was like, hey man, I'll coach you for free. I need you to cancel your DirecTV and stop drinking Starbucks every day. Crickets, never heard from him again. So it's like there's a certain level of like, everybody can afford to get better. I mean, there's so much content on YouTube. I probably have enough interviews on YouTube that people can get the first 6 months of my coaching for free on YouTube, right? And a lot of people, you mentioned that group of 9-to-5ers that just don't have the mindset. They're not playing the game. You can obtain those skills if you have the mindset. I mean, YouTube is just, I went to an Alex Hormozy event a couple weeks ago that, paid a couple grand to go to. And about 80% of what he said is for free on YouTube. Now, there was some value in being in the room. There was some value in meeting other people. I made some connections that were well worth the money of attendance. But like most of this stuff is free, right? Most of the stuff is out there.
And frankly, if you want to distill it even better, just buy the book or go to your library and request it, right? Yeah. Anybody who is out there, like Hormozy's book is behind me over here. It's fantastic. Yeah. Right? It's a fantastic book, and it distills all the information he puts into 100 hours or 300 hours of YouTube videos. Right? Buy my book, buy Scott's book. You'll get a lot of our lessons. What I'm doing now is like I'm writing another book, and I started writing, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to coach 4 companies to get their CEOs or the founders to exit. Not exit as in sell the business, because they still believe in the mission. Like, I don't want to sell my business. The only way I would sell Aviator at this point is either stupid, God-changing, like, okay, I now believe in this God, right? Money.
Right.
Which would then be distributed between my employees, my team, my family, right? Or to the employees.
Yeah.
That's it. But exiting the operations of the business was so crucial to my health, both for me as a father and a husband, and for my actual physical health, that like it became the only mission. So I'm going to teach 4 other companies how to do that. Like 4 other CEOs or founders, like, hey, here's how you pull yourself away. Here's how you let yourself grieve the ego death. Because when you lose a title, it hurts.
Yes.
I don't know why. Like, not being CEO of my baby, like, okay, I'm the chairman now. What's a chairman do? Well, nothing. He offers advice when there's over a $500,000 purchase or decision. I offer advice. Other than that, I shouldn't even know what's happening in my company, right? That's my job. So those 4 companies, then I can start writing. I don't want to just tell my story. I want to tell other people's stories. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to take 4 companies on. They don't have the stories, because it is just such a small niche. It's just such a small world of people who get it.
Right.
Anyway.
Wow, man. Tell me about your book, Farewell to Normal. I'm embarrassed that I haven't read it. I hate when I have a guest on when I haven't read their book, but my book backlog is getting pretty excessive right now, so I apologize. So give us the cliff notes for Farewell to Normal.
It's okay, Scott. I haven't read your book either.
Perfect. Well, you don't need to lead generate. You're not in the sales world. You're in the 30,000 foot strategic aviator view of things. So there's no reason for you to read my book.
After hearing Tucker Max rip your book a new one, I don't know that I can read it.
Oh my God. You know what? He called me afterwards and he's like, Scott, I just got to tell you, the fact that you have 300 5-star reviews means the content of your book must be top notch. I can just tell that without reading it. But goddamn,
so shitty.
He's like, your book looks so shitty. The cover is such dog shit. The write-up on Amazon is horrible. Your author page, horrible. Everything about your book sucks, but it must be great content because you got 300 5-star reviews, and that doesn't happen on accident. There's people that sell, tens of thousands of copies of a book, and they get 5, 10 reviews. He's like, so kudos to the content. Damn, we need to work on the wrapper. And I was like, all right, cool. And then he just kept going. He's like, you know how most people have like dog shit wrapped in a really nice wrapping paper, but we know it's dog shit. He's like, you actually have a diamond encrusted in dog shit. I'm like, no, I get it. I don't need any more analogies, Tucker. Thank you.
And for those of you guys who don't know the backstory of this, Tucker Max is also a front row dad. Multi-time New York Times bestseller, incredible publisher. Like, the guy knows his stuff. He's also probably the most crass and say it to your face exactly as he means it, whether you like it or not, person I've ever known in my life.
Yeah.
I love him to death for that. Also, it's a very challenging friendship because you know that there's never going to be any sugarcoating,
right, ever.
And Scott showed him his book page, and after he roasted Scott, I was like, here's mine, please roast me, because it was so funny.
Yeah.
Less funny being on the receiving side, but it was still funny. No,
I always love when Tucker's around, because when Tucker's around, I don't get the comment of like, oh, Scott, you're so crass, but you're so likable. Or, hey, Scott, you cuss a lot, but I love that you're spitting all this truth, because nobody is more crass or more crude than Tucker. So I look like the JV team compared to him. He's like a good foil for me.
Yeah, him and Mike Higgins makes more sex jokes than I do, so I feel like I'm in a good place, right? You have to have those friends that are worse than you. It's a good thing.
Totally. So tell me about Farewell to Normal.
So I sat down in 2018. I was approached by a couple of publishers, and they're like, "Hey, Eric, you seems like you might have some stories." And did they preliminary interview with Forbes and a couple others? And I was very hesitant to write a book because I didn't feel like my life was that noteworthy, and it felt like to write a book would be to say that I'm awesome.
Right.
When especially at that point in my life, before I'd done a lot of the work that I've done now with the interpersonal work and the meditation, the breath work and the plant medicines, all these different elements that can come into your life, I really didn't love myself very much. I really didn't care for myself at all. There was a lot of really hard things in my life. And eventually I finally got a publisher to convince me, like, Eric, you have several books in your head. You have crazy stories. You need to go and tell the story. And it's funny because I've given the best man at my wedding a lot of shit over the years, because when I was 19, he was 22, we rode our motorcycles to Alaska. And that has been his story. Every time you ever meet Ethan Demme, Ethan will tell you about, like, pilots will tell you that they pilot, and jujitsu bros will tell you they jujitsu. CrossFit guys, like we all have
Right.
our things. Ethan's thing is, I rode a motorcycle to Alaska during the 40-year storm. We hung out with some crazy actors and that were filming Into the Wild. Like, he has these stories. I don't think I've told the story of me riding a motorcycle to Alaska, like, in detail since I did it. Because it was just like one more thing I did, but somehow it ended up in my book all over it. Like, because there's a lot of lessons I learned there. So Farewell to Normal, the whole concept of the book is just like, basically, it doesn't matter how broke you are. It doesn't matter how much pain you're in. I live in a lot of pain. Choosing to be a victor over a victim is a choice. It is a decision that you get to make every day. Will I be victim to my circumstance, or will I choose my dharma? Choose, I don't know if you know the term, but the yogic tradition, like, my mission in life is to choose to overcome rather than be overcome. And so there's just a bunch of stories, and it shares some business lessons and some ideas. And I don't know, I haven't read in 4 years, so maybe it's good, maybe it's not. It's been a while. The next one will be better, I'm sure.
Funny story. You mentioned you hung out with a bunch of the actors from Into the Wild. Emil Hirsch, I think, was the lead in that movie. I have so many mixed feelings about that movie. When you first watch the movie and you're like, it's kind of this romanticized, oh, he gave everything up, blah, 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 blah. You leave that movie like, yeah, it's really sad. I don't feel like I'm spoiling anything because the movie's been out for a decade. It's like, it's really sad that he died at the end, but he really, like, gave it the college try to go off the grid and live the way that he wanted to live. And then, like, 6 months later, the movie popped in my head, and I'm like, fuck that guy. Like, what a moron. Like, what a loser. You know, he basically committed suicide by just going off the grid. And I've got a friend who owns a house very close to that area up in Denali. And he's like, dude, he was like 2 miles from a camp ranger station. Like, it was pretty much suicide by excommunication. And
he made a decision.
He made a decision that was going to be the end. And it's like, and then you hear about the follow-up story where there was a lot of abuse as a kid and the guy had a lot. I mean, I just have such mixed feelings about that. The only thing I don't have mixed feelings about is that I think that's probably Eddie Vedder's best work. The soundtrack the soundtrack for that movie, and this is hard for me to say because I'm a huge Pearl Jam fan, I think the soundtrack for that movie is better than anything Pearl Jam's come out with. It's just like, it's a moving, passionate soundtrack that, like, probably only Eddie Vedder and maybe a handful of guys could do. So for those of you that have not watched Into the Wild, go watch Into the Wild and report back with your feelings. Yeah, spoiler alert, dies. Doesn't work out well for him.
So two little tangents that are worth going down. One, my buddy owns 49th State Brewing, which you can't see it anymore because it's worked off this glass, but that's where I got this glass. And they have the bus from the movie at their Denali location at that brewing company. And 2022, my wife and I took our first vacation ever. We took our 3 kids to Alaska for a month. Great time. We camped at the brewing company, had a great time there. They hung out in the bus, all those things. Second, Emil Hirsch had his own accommodations. So we were riding our motorcycles through Alaska, through their 40-year storm. And as we passed through Denali, the bridges are washing out with us on them. The water's up to our shins on motorcycles. We rode all day, and I think we did 8 miles.
Oh my God.
All day, right? Brutal experience. I'm back in 2022, and I'm at the same lodge that we stopped at and we were able to find a room at. And I asked the lady, I'm like, did you happen to be here? You know, like 17 years ago? She's like, yeah. I'm like, do you remember the storm? Yeah. I'm like, I stayed here that night. She's like, I served you. You know, like these crazy stories. But we ended up at a lodge that was sold out. And we are so desperate at this point. The level of cold, I'm a Floridian, right? The level of cold, going over a mountain pass, everything's ice. I was broke. I didn't have the money, so I didn't have rain gear. So I'm wearing racing leathers, top to bottom, racing leathers. Excuse me. And we pull into this place, and it ended up being myself, my best man, on his bike. We met a guy who was a lieutenant in the Marine Corps. He just commissioned, and he got some time off, and he's like, I'm going to ride my motorcycle to Alaska. So we met him right before we entered Alaska. We've been together for 3 days. Great guy. I'm not going to say who it was because of the rest of the story. You'll understand in a minute. And 2 other guys who had ridden their cafe bikes from Minnesota, which just is insane because they're so uncomfortable, right? I was on a Yamaha FC1, which is also uncomfortable. I've got great carpal tunnel in both wrists from that ride.
But cafe racers are like, they barely have suspension. They'll just vibrate your kidneys loose.
Exactly. So we ended up with 5 of us, and we get there, like, there's no rooms, I was like, what do you mean there's no rooms? Like I grew up in the hotel business. Like you must have a ready room. They're like, no, there's no ready rooms. Like there's a movie being filmed and they're all staying here. And I said, okay, can we rent your lobby? Like we cannot get back on the road. We're so cold, like we can't get back on the road. And it's dumping rain on us for 16 hours. We're just done. Like I'm going to die if I go back out there. I'm going to freaking Emil Hirsch this thing. Like it's going to happen. Right. And so I stopped somebody in the lobby as they're walking through. I'm like, hey, can I pay to rent your room? And the guy's like, it's paid for. I'm union. It's paid for. I'm like, do you have an extra bed? Like, this is like just Eric, like at 1,000% sales. Like, I'm like, I am just going to get everyone in my party a place to sleep that's warm. I ended up in a room with 2 beds, no floor. There's joists. They're like repairing the room. So I ended up in a room with 2 joists. We all warm up, we get warm showers, and we head downstairs. And that's when we run into the entire party of cast, crew, and the producer of that movie was Sean Penn. And I know that you and Sean Penn's politics are very closely aligned.
Oh yeah. Me and Sean Penn, we're right. Like both of us could not be more progressive.
Yes. So they served fish bowls there, which I'd never had. I was 19, right? They had a fish bowl cocktail with the 6-foot straws. And like all the cast are standing around tables with 6-foot long straws drinking out of fish bowls. And by the end of the night, Sean Penn has given my buddy, the Marine, his cell phone number and says if he ever wants to defect to North Korea, he's got a direct line and he can make it happen for him.
Oh my God. I'm very politically opinionated, but I kind of pride myself on like, I can have a conversation with just about anybody and find some common ground. Be like, hey, we disagree on how to get there, but we both generally agree in like the positive movement forward of the country. Sean Penn, somebody I don't think I could come to 1 ounce of common, like just insight into how things should be run. Like he's one of those people. I don't like maybe him and Rachel Maddow. I don't, unless she's just playing a caricature of herself. I don't think I could find any common ground. It would not have been a comfortable night at the bar had Sean Penn and I start talking about politics.
We had a great time. We were just like egging him on, like learning. Like I'm so fascinated. This has been a childhood thing for me. When I was growing up, we were a very Christian family and we had a home church and this guy showed up with an electric guitar and he was like the coolest guy ever. And I told him I was really sad that he was going to hell because he played the electric guitar. Right.
Oh, you were in that kind of family.
Oh yeah.
This explains a lot, by the way.
Oh, it does, doesn't it? Yeah, it really does. But like, I am fascinated about learning from people I totally disagree with. Because you can be wrong and still teach me something.
Oh yeah.
Or maybe I'll be wrong, but like, it's fascinating to learn from those guys. Like with Sean Penn, it was this experience going, he couldn't be further from how I was raised, but he still loved people. And there was still something in him that really showed a lot of love. And it was like, not just that he was buying all the drinks, it was also kind of cool to learn from him.
Sean Penn starred in a movie that to me has the best political meme ever. And the meme is of that movie with him and Susan Sarandon, Dead Man Walking, where it's like he's a murderer and she's a nun. And she's trying to like bring him to Christ before he dies and whatnot. And it's super emotional and you're supposed to really feel for the guy by the time he's dead man walking down to be executed. And the meme is, if you saw Dead Man Walking and were still excited to see Sean Penn die at the end, you just might be a conservative. To me, that's like I'm like, yeah, because I watched that movie and I'm like, oh yeah, I get what they were trying to do here, and that motherfucker should die. And so that kind of solidified. Yeah, you should watch it. And when you have compassion for the main character, aka Sean Penn, you'll be like, man, Scott is really politically opinionated. It's a great movie, by the way. Wonderful movie. I think it actually won an Oscar. And it's a very well done movie, but at the end you either feel super sympathetic to the murderer or you're like, yeah, string him up, it's cool, man, whatever, end the movie, not going to think about it again. And that will help you define your politics if you don't know where you lay on the political spectrum.
I know where I lay on the political spectrum. It's like right in the middle.
Yeah, that's why you live in Austin, right? Blue dot, red state.
That's right. It's so fun, like going to these National Stoll events, which, it's largely people who fly personal airplanes are very conservative.
Right.
Because they have money and they like to spend it on themselves, and it's really an interesting group of human beings. And I told people I was in Minnesota in Iowa, Minnesota, where these beautiful horns came from, that I was living in Austin, Texas, and they're like, "Don't talk about your politics here, boy." And I was like, I'm a libertarian. I've never registered with either party. I'm sorry. I believe that people should be good to each other and that we shouldn't get taxes. You know, that's basically what I believe.
Perfect. I like it. I want to circle back to two things you said about growing your business, and I'm interested in these two like dichotomies. You said, you didn't have the option of ever thinking that your parents were going to be able to pay for anything. So you had this, crazy instilled work ethic, entrepreneurship. Like you just knew money was the path to being able to afford the things that your parents could not afford. And I think about this all the time. Actually, you mentioned him earlier, Ryan. I can never pronounce his last name. I don't know if it's Levesque. Yeah. So Ryan Levesque and I were having this conversation where he's like, yeah, I don't want to rob my children of the opportunity to work for the things that they have. So, kid wanted a bike and I made him work for the bike. He had to save $500 or whatever it was. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, oh shit. Like I was that kid that had to go sell 2,000 Christmas ornaments so I could win a bike in the, grade school Christmas sell shit for the school competition. My kid needed a new bike because he grew like an awkward amount in 6 months. So I just went and bought him a new bike. And I'm like, do you ever worry about the fact that now that you have some money, and I don't know exactly how you raised your kids, but I have some ideas because we're in Front Row Dads together. Do you ever worry that you're like robbing your kids of the opportunity you were able to create for yourself due to the fact that you have money and your parents didn't? Because I think about this all the time. Like, I don't want my kid to be an entitled prick, but I don't want him to also suffer and have this scarcity mindset of like, we can only buy one new pair of shoes a year. And then what that metabolized into is in my 20s, I probably spent tens of thousands of dollars on Nikes because that was the way that I proved to myself that I had made it. There's a new pair of Nikes. I'm going to buy them in 3 different colors because that makes me feel complete and successful. And, I no longer have this feeling of scarcity. So it's like, I don't know where the middle ground is. Give me some thoughts on this as far as like raising kids.
Dude, you just hit the number one thing that I have asked other fathers who look like they're doing it right. That question more times than anything else I could think of. I spent 7 years in EO, entrepreneurs organization. There's 22,000 members, 7-figure businesses around the world. Great guys. It's actually where I found Front Row Dads. Actually, it was a EO Dads group. I have 2 fears. One is that my anger will win out and that my kids will not feel safe with me. And I work really hard at this because I grew up in a very angry household. I grew up in a household where screaming and yelling and
me too, man,
beating the absolute shit out of you. And once you turn 16, you don't get spanked anymore. You get punched in the face. Like that's not the way I want to raise my kids. And the second fear is that whatever I do to raise them will leave them without the hunger that allowed me to do. Like this sounds like a hoity statement, but like, or haughty statement, I should say. I have changed the lives of thousands of families whose father, brother, mother, sister came and learned to fly with us and discovered a new part of themselves, realized presence for the first time, realized what it meant to be truly in themselves, truly in their heart body versus in their mind and their fears and all these other things. Like once you progress beyond fear, that's where real living begins. And so I had a hunger, not for things, for experiences that allowed me to buy my first airplane, buy my first car, buy my first truck, buy my first motorcycle, buy my first race bike, buy my first race car. Like those elements of hunger are why I am the man I am today. And I don't want to rob my kids of those. I do want to create experiences and opportunities. And like, I'll take them to Alaska and spend a godly amount of money on incredible experiences. But we stayed in an RV that a friend lent us, right? That had no heat when it dumped 6 inches of snow on us. It was 27 degrees in the trailer. And they learned that they could get warm. And they learned that even though they were terrified of going whitewater rafting through Denali for the first time ever, it was the best part of the trip. And they learned that the 12-mile hike with 1,500 feet of vertical or 2,500 feet of vertical was a lot to go see the glacier, but it was incredible to see it. And they wouldn't want to miss it, right? I want to give them these opportunities. that cost me money. I'm going to give them these opportunities to face their fears. And when they want a new bike, Christmas and birthdays are different, right? Like that's fine. But there's an opportunity for my eldest, his name is August. He's 12. And he, in 2020, so 4 years ago, he was 8. And we went on a road trip as a family. And it was the height of COVID. And we hired a filmmaker to live in a 6-foot by 8-foot section of our cargo trailer. We called it the gas chamber because it was full of motorcycles and paramotors in the back. And he felt a passion for filmmaking. So Reese, who's this incredible team member of ours, like the guy's one of my best friends in the entire world. He just happens to work for me, taught him. And this 8-year-old ran around with a bicycle helmet with a GoPro on it, carrying a Panasonic GH4 or GH5, filming for our TV show or YouTube show. And that passion has continued. He volunteered at 7 of the 8 events or 6 of the 8 events last year, spent 10 hours a day on top of a trailer filming airplanes, right? Dangerous, dusty, hot, cold, did the work. And now there's an opportunity for him to become an editor for National Stolen. He's going to get paid like an adult would. Like it's not going to be, $20 an hour. It's going to be like $55, $60 an hour for editing work because it's worth it. And he's buying Final Cut, $300. I'm going to split it with him because he doesn't have $300 right now because he's been spending his money on things. That's a whole other lesson. Actually, I'll share that one because it's worth sharing.
Hey, this quick interruption is brought to you by me, Scott Groves, the host of the On the Edge podcast. This podcast is brought to you by me. I'm a loan officer who can help you with a mortgage in all 50 states across the United States. I also coach loan officers. So if you are a home buyer who's looking to get a mortgage, if you're a realtor who's looking to partner with an awesome loan officer, or if you're a loan officer looking for coaching, get in touch with me. It's those sources of revenue that allow us to produce this podcast and get out a new episode to you every week for the last couple of years. So if you're looking for a mortgage, if you're looking for a mortgage lender to partner with, or you're looking for a mortgage coach, I'm your guy. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming. So you're talking about splitting the money with your kiddo for this $300 software.
Yeah. So for those of you guys who don't know, Scott has the worst technology package in the history of mankind. So we have to record these and interrupt the interviewee and just completely derail the train of thought. But that's okay because we're professionals. We're going to totally come back exactly where we were, mainly because I don't have a cigar or whiskey. But I know you're going to edit all that out probably, but I hope you don't.
No, we're keeping it in.
Entertaining. Excellent. All that to say, my kid has a great opportunity to make some good money, but having him invest in his own success to me is crucial. There's a lot of areas where I want to baby and coddle and I want to make things easy and I want to make things functional. But they've known since they were 7 or 8 years old that they're buying their own first car. They're going to pay for their own insurance. My wife and I don't have a college fund for them. We have a therapy fund, which is very purposeful. We both had a bunch of childhood trauma, and therapy was something that was so frowned upon that it nearly ended our marriage. And once we've discovered talk therapy and then all the other elements of what can go into personal development, it was so life-changing that we realized more than higher education, we want to encourage them to become the best version of themselves internally from their heart first, and their mind will follow. If we ever did pay for college, I've seen a few examples of this that worked really beautifully. And that's they can go to college. My uncle did this with his kids, 2 of which are airline pilots. One's a stay-at-home mom who was a flight attendant. He said, you can go to college and I'll pay for it when you turn 21. Let's get rid of those 3 years of indecision and illegal drinking and give you a time, go see the world, go do what you want to do. I love that. So many of those decisions aren't fully formed, but I don't think that I will ever give my kids everything they want. They get 3 presents for Christmas, 3 presents for their birthday. And I hope that they're meaningful. Christmas in my family, by the way, I got toilet clippers one year. I got toiletable cleaner one year. I got a Bissell sweeper. That was a big year.
Nice.
Because we didn't have the money for these things that I wanted. I'll never forget the year that my cousins got paintball guns, Brass Eagle Talon, pump plastic paintball guns.
Yep.
And my dad took one from my cousin and said, run. And my dad's pumping, pop, 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 shots and shots after my cousin. And my cousin turns around, leans back, takes one clean shot. It hits my dad in the nose. and they called him Uncle Rudolph for the rest of Christmas. It was fantastic, but we didn't have those opportunities, right? So I don't know if that answers your question, but it is the question I've asked the most successful entrepreneurs: is how do you keep from robbing your children of the value of hunger?
Yeah. I've been trying to think like that book Grit. Like how do you get your kids, adopting that to kids? How do you get them to do the tough things? And it's one of the reasons why, like, this is just a non-negotiable. My kids will always play some type of combat sport, or they will be involved in, like, cool. If it's not jujitsu, then you better figure out Muay Thai or boxing. And I don't want you to have brain damage. So maybe you're hitting a bag and you're hitting pads instead of another human being. But like, you're just always going to do something tough. You know, I want my son to know what it's like if another man puts hands on him. And I want my daughter for it to be real hard to take advantage of her. I've got a coaching client. She's a badass. She's 145 pounds. And when she does that DEXA scan, she's like 107 pounds of lean muscle mass. I mean, she's a beast. CrossFit coach, either a purple belt or a brown belt. And her and I were having a discussion because I was talking about my daughter hopefully instilling this passion in like jujitsu or some type of combat sport. And she's like, yeah. She's like, let's be honest. You're a 200-pound man on the mat. You just crushed me today, even though I'm stronger than you for my body mass and I'm better than you at jiu-jitsu. But like, you're a 200-pound guy. I'm a 140-pound woman. And she said this like just as openly as possible in front of my wife and a bunch of other women. She was like, you know, I'm not going to beat you in a fight, but I'll be damn hard to rape. And I was like, all right, that really brought into focus real fast, you know? Yeah. And I'm like, so my kids will always do some type of really hard sport, and we're trying to integrate other challenging things into their life. But it's hard, man. Like when you come from a family where it's like, hey, you get one pair of shoes a year because that's what we can afford. It's like, no, but I want to buy my kids shoes right now because they need them and they're cool. And I like Nikes and they like Nikes and we bond over this stuff, right? It's like, it's a serious dilemma. I wanted to come over.
Actually, really quick before you jump ahead, I wanted to go back to that. I cannot have anything in my life that I use every day that I don't have at least 6 backups for. Like, it is to the point where it's comical. I'm not a prepper, but I have 6 months of food for 10 people in my house in Florida because I have a shipping container behind the house, so I have space for it, right? Because we so often went without something that I wanted or needed that it became such an imperative to always have extra. And God bless my wife, she accepts this. My grandfather came through the Depression. And when he started making money, he always wore one of two things: a pink or a white flight suit and a pair of sneakers, white sneakers, Velcro, right? The year before he died, he bought another pallet of sneakers. He was a drinker, so he had a nuclear bomb shelter that had pallets of every type of booze he liked stacked to the ceiling so that he could make sure he never ran out. He hid food in his room. All over, behind every book, there was a piece of food or a piece of candy or something to make sure he never ran out. Because when you've grown up with that lack, it's just like your sneaker thing. Like, dude, I'm not a sneakerhead, right? But I can appreciate it. I've done this with vehicles my whole life. I probably own 15 vehicles right now, right? Because getting a vehicle is so hard. I probably have 8 or 9 motorcycles. I've got 2 airplanes, a truck in Texas, 2 vans in Florida, a car in Florida. Like, it's obnoxious. And mind you, I am one of the very few people who has this much that it actually does get used. Like, my van gets used by my staff anytime they want to move. They need to use something, it's theirs. My house is full of people right now. I have friends who just drove down from Pennsylvania that are in my house they visit us every year this time of year. And they're like, oh, it sucks so much in Pennsylvania. I'm like, go to Florida, use our house. Like, it's not wasteful, but it's such an incredible thing to feel the peace. Like when you fill up your phone and your phone is fully charged or your truck is full of gas. And like, yeah, once you reach a level of affluence where that is no longer a thought process, it's just, okay, we have food in the fridge. We're covered. We're set. We've got, if it freezes in Austin and we have, plenty of food, we have ways to heat the house. We have a generator, we have solar, we have like those little elements. I try to teach my kids to celebrate because they'll never have the hunger of knowing what it's like to go cold or knowing what it's like. When Hurricane Charlie hit, I was living in California. Charlie hit us, ripped the roof off our house, killed the power. No power for, I think it was 7 weeks. I flew back to Florida. The next hurricane filled our house with water. We put a new roof on. I had the storm 3 times in 7 weeks, right? The third hurricane ripped the roof off again. No power, no water, no food. And like living through, I was 18. I came back to Florida to help my family, and like living through that and looking at what that emotionally did to me of going, I must be better prepared than my parents no matter what. Like I've known since I was probably 16 that I'm my parents' retirement plan. I don't want to do that to my kids because that's traumatic too. But there's so many elements there, right? And I warned you this would go long, but monologue number 7 complete.
This is good stuff. Like we're talking about these tensions, right? And like how we raise kids, how we think about stuff. There's another tension that I'm interested of, like, you know, it's so normal in the group of people we live around that it's almost cliche, where it's like, I worked really hard, I made all the money, and then I was able to do the inner work, you know, and I was able to like come to peace with who I am. And I was able to like do the work. You mentioned that phrase, do the work, multiple times already in this podcast. And I wonder, we might have a very different opinion on this. Had you done the work when you were 20, would you have had the fire in your belly to grow the things that you grew? Like, it's almost like if you came to grips and you were accepting of who you were and you put the childhood trauma behind you, would you have had the fire in your belly to grow the things that you grow? Or would you have grown something even bigger and greater? And I have really mixed feelings about this of like, does that trauma kind of drive you? And then, all right, great. After you're financially successful, now you can kind of slow down and you can reflect and you can go to the retreats and you can do the counseling and you can do the therapy. Or do most human beings, I would say, have to go through the 20 years of shit of living with the trauma and being driven by the anger or the fear or the scarcity or whatever? It's like, I don't know. Do people build big empires while also being super enlightened and happy? Or do you get there after you've grown the shit?
Man, if I was 20, I'm gonna get emotional. If I was 20 and I went to therapy, and that was the first step, and then someone taught me meditation. And this happened to me in 2019. I went to a couples retreat, and the leader had to start breathing and meditating, and he says, "This is self-control." In my whole life, people told me, you need more self-control, you need more self-control, you need more self-control. And no one ever told me what the fuck it was. First F-bomb on the show. You're welcome. No one ever told me what it was. They told me I needed something that was ineffable. There was no finish line. It was just, you need this thing because you don't have enough control of yourself. And I loved the idea that there was something I needed, but I didn't know what it was. If I was 20 and I learned what meditation was, I learned how to control my body, I learned how to control my breath, I learned how to get to heightened states, both through meditation, through breath work, through whatever mechanism, my marriage would have been a 10 out of 10 for the last 15 years, not the last 4. My business would have changed 50,000 lives, not 2,000. I had to cough. I genuinely believe that, yes, we are driven by our trauma. We are driven to grow more, particularly if you look at, like, Alison Armstrong has a great book about this, the stages in life for men. As a prince or a knight, you're doing this fighting, and as a prince, you are building a kingdom. To become a king, you have to recognize your own mortality, and you have to go through a tunnel of despair, of questioning whether or not you've done the right thing. If I was 20 and I did the inner work that being successful gave me the opportunity to do. And to put this in perspective, I spend well over the average salary in the US on personal development, body work, pain relief every year, like $50,000, $60,000 a year. Like, and that's because I can afford to. And the body work is brutal. It's rolfing, which is like massage if your masseuse hates you. And it's awful, but also it's healing trauma, and both physically and emotionally. My wife does Eden energy medicine, so like she's like running her hands over my meridians. I'm like flopping all over the bed. It's not fun. It's the work, and having enough success to be able to get to that point is amazing. this will be a statement politically that I would not normally make, but I'll say it on your podcast, not mine. I think if you took every church and converted it to a meditation center, you'd change the world. If you allowed people to look inwardly instead of looking at guilt, shame, and all the other things that religion does. And there are many religions who do it great. There's many positive experiences in churches that do it great. I'm not saying that that's not true, but my experience was that of guilt and shame instead of help you learn to be you. So while yes, I love that I had all this to fuel me, and certainly it had an aid. If I'd been healthy first, if I'd been at peace first, if I'd healed generational wounds first, I wouldn't blame my dad for making me go to the peach tree and pick my own switch and beat me till I was black and blue, right? Because I would have understood that he was doing his best. I would have understood that he was trying his hardest to follow No Greater Joy, which was the parenting book of the time. And thankfully, he didn't chain me to the well outside in Oregon that killed the two kids, because that was another family who was following the same script, right? There's terrible scripts out there, people doing horrible things. I believe that the better we can prepare our children to fully embody themselves, leave them with some hunger, leave them with some desire, and help them see what the world could be, we'd be a healthier world for it. And that's probably the most political thing you'll ever hear me say.
No, I love it, man. It's good stuff, because we've talked a lot in Front Row Dads about conscious leadership, and this conversation has come up a lot where it's like, hey, you didn't get where you were because of the stuff below the line, as they call it, and this chip on your shoulder, this drive, this trauma. You didn't get there because of that. You would be more successful, in spite of it, if you could get above the line and do the work first. Because I know, like, key employees who I've lost, it's been because I didn't have the self-control of holding my tongue, right? Or I didn't do a good job laying out the vision for them because I was too self-centered or selfish or whatever the case may be. It's like, I know this about myself. I'm trying to work on that. And I just think about it. It's like, hey, I've had some relative success, especially compared to, the family situation that I came from. And my parents, same thing, man. Like, I forgive them for everything because I was born when they were 19 and 20. They didn't know what the fuck they were doing. They did the best they could, and they sacrificed a lot to make sure that I could go to Boy Scouts and be around great mentors and participate in sports and be around great mentors. And they did the absolute best they could, and they worked their ass off. And I've got a million complaints about how they parented me, but like, what's the use, right? Like, you just kind of got to get over it and move on. And I have done, thanks to a bunch of the things that we've been exposed to in Front Row Dads, done a lot of that stuff. And I'm like, I wonder if I would have been a $200 million producer instead of a $100 million producer if I had gotten to that work earlier. Maybe not. I think so. I don't know.
Or maybe you would have been drawn to something that made a bigger impact on a planetary, like, human level. Maybe you could have convinced Sean Penn to, not want to pay taxes.
Dude, that would be the crowning achievement of my life if I could convince, like, Sean Penn to be a libertarian, right? Like over a couple cocktails, a half a dozen cigars. There has been some people.
I'll get you a cell. It's fine.
Yeah. I'm sure that's just what he wants to hear from. Some random podcast in Vegas. Hey, can you come on so I can convince you to be a libertarian? I really think there's something here. It's funny because when I started the podcast, I hired a tutor because I'm like, well, I feel like I'm pretty well read, but I am not well educated. Like you, I pretty much gave up on school at like 15 and somehow muddled my way through high school. And I'm like, I'm going to say something stupid on the podcast. Like, I think I'm referring to the Bill of Rights and it's actually the Magna Carta or something, right? Like, I'm going to screw this up. So I hired a tutor. And one of the first questions he asked me when we were talking about politics, he's like, all right, you live in Los Angeles. Cabo is way closer to you than New Hampshire. Do you feel more of a kinship to a Mexican national libertarian who lives in Cabo versus a Bernie Sanders socialist who lives in New Hampshire? It's like, you have more in common with the libertarian Mexican than you do with the American socialist, but like, where are the boundaries? Where do you define yourself as a citizen? Where do you define yourself as a person in this world? And we talked for like 8 hours just about that. And so I've had to explore some of these thought processes, and I feel like I'm better suited now to state my case about what I believe. I don't know why I felt compelled to say that, but we were talking about being
So
libertarian.
which one do you feel closer to now? I'm intrigued.
I still very much believe in the idea of America as a, democratic republic. So I still feel more of a kinship to that, blue-haired, crazy, non-binary socialist in Vermont than I do a carbon copy of Scott in Mexico. And that doesn't make any rational sense, but to me, it makes sense at like a community level of what I think a country is supposed to be. Which, again, not to get too political, is why I don't understand it being xenophobic or racist or whatever to say that we should have secure borders. Like, I really don't even understand why that's a political issue. Because to me, like, having a secure border is just like table stakes for having a country. And I don't think that should be a political comment. I don't think it should be controversial or anything. It's just like, oh, if we're going to agree that we live in this place called a world that has countries, you kind of have to have a border around the country, right? Like, I don't let my neighbor just come shit in my bathroom because it's like we have this thing called property rights and this is my property and that's his property. He should probably go stink up his own bathroom, right? It's like, and that's not to say I dislike my neighbor. I love my neighbor. He brings me free chicken eggs or free eggs from his, farm raised chickens over there.
Chickens?
Chicken eggs from chickens. Go figure.
Chicken eggs.
But it's like, I don't expect him to just come over unannounced and shit in my bathroom. It's just, I don't know. It's weird. Anyway, we don't have to go down that whole path.
I want to go down it a little bit because it's interesting. I've been in a lot of places around the world. And in 2017, I went to Cuba. And it was the most safe I'd ever felt in a third world country. I had a business in Costa Rica, that one of our dealers, and I spent a lot of time in Costa Rica. I spent a lot of time in many different third world, quote unquote, countries. I walked through the ghettos in Cuba and was just fascinated by the people. And I tried to bring over Cubans, South Africans, English. My challenge with border security is that I went back to Cuba last year, January, for almost 2 weeks. And 25% of the country had left in the last 12 months. That's the number that the Cubans gave me. I don't know if it's actually true, but that's the number they gave me. They went to Guatemala and they made their way to the US. And for a country of incredibly intrepid, solid people who are just struggling under the regime, whose lives were swept away from them, whose fortunes were ripped away. You look at Bacardi versus Havana Select, right? The Bacardi family left as communist influence became the policy, and they built a multi-billion-dollar empire around their rum. Whereas Havana Select stayed, and all their wealth was stripped. It's heartbreaking. I loved Cuba in 2017. I was like, I can't wait to go back and experience Cuba because it's just an incredible place. And my wife came with me the first trip and she got sick, and I have an iron stomach. So like, I'm like feeding her water that's like local water. And like, I'm like making it worse, and we went back together. And then I had my EO forum came down with us, and we had a great time, but I don't think I'll ever go back to Cuba. And the levels of hoops that you have to jump through as a business owner with a 7-figure, 8-figure business, trying to bring subject matter experts in a field that has 5,000 participants in the US, right? Tiny field. And I'm trying to bring in the best experts from around the world to come and work for me. And it's impossible. I could spend $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 on an attorney, and it still comes down to a lottery.
Yeah.
Right? Yet people can cross the border illegally. I don't care about the politics of it. I do care about disparate levels of fairness. And like, it just sucks. I've got a guy in Cuba, nice guy in the world. So we charge just under $4,000 to learn to fly. He teaches people how to fly in Cuba, which by the way, is either legal or illegal, depending on the day of the week. Like, go to jail or you're fine, depending on the day of the week. He charges $32 for a week of training.
Holy shit. So basically what you're telling me is to skip Eric's school and go to Cuba to learn to fly.
I mean, as long as you like communism, I would highly recommend Cuba. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm a big fan of communism.
They didn't have any soap. When I was there was no soap and no beef. But, other than that, it was fantastic. No, I'm kidding. It was really sad to see how a country could let itself go so much and this kind of goes back to way earlier in our conversation, but like countries, businesses, people, if you don't have a clear vision for your why, you don't have a clear understanding of what it means to the universe, to your country, to your business, for why you do what you do, it all falls apart. And like, don't get me wrong, America has its struggles. Like anyone left leaning can tell you how many struggles we have.
Right.
Anyone right leaning can tell you how many struggles we have. That's why I'm a centrist. But the reality is, like, we at least have some idealism left. And these countries like Cuba, and I haven't been to Russia, but I've spent a fair amount of time in Czech Republic and Poland. And you see these countries who are recovering from that or are still in the throes of it, and they just don't have a why anymore. And it hurts your soul. You go to Auschwitz and you see the suffering and you see the absolute moral decay that comes from saying one person's better than another. And it's just staggering. Sorry, we got on a rabbit trail here, but it is staggering. It's just really fascinating to see. And like, I just want to keep bringing more good into the world.
Yeah.
Period.
And ironically, I want to bring a lot more good into the country. Like, my opinion has always been, it should be 100 times easier to get here legally and 100 times harder to get here illegally. Like, you know, it just doesn't make any sense to me that you can have an amazing human being who would be an absolute model match for your business. Your business would do better. He would do business better as a human being because he can make more than $32 a week. And that's just not even a viable option for him to come here legally. But illegally, just kind of get to the shore and we'll figure it out. I mean, it seems very unfair. And I look at my son, and it's so funny. My son and I are so, I mean, it's just like looking in a time capsule going back 40 years. My son has such a moral compass of what's just and what's not that sometimes it gets annoying, right? Like I'll kind of make a offhanded comment of like, hey buddy, yeah, you can go to jiu-jitsu with me tomorrow. And 5:30 rolls around and I go to kind of wake him up and he's tired and he looks so peaceful. I leave him there. When I get home, Eric, he is hurt at a level that I can't even explain. And it's not only that he's hurt that he didn't get to go do this cool thing with dad and pretend like he's one of the guys and go to the adult jiu-jitsu class at 6 a.m. It's this level of just where he's like, no, you spoke it, therefore it is. You told me half-heartedly last night that I was going to go to jiu-jitsu in the morning. If you had to pour a bottle of cold water in my face, you were supposed to wake me up, father, and take me to jiu-jitsu. And he has this like, this not self-righteousness, but this feeling of righteousness in the world that it's me. And it's weird looking back in time at me 40 years ago. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's why I hate stuff like this immigration policy, because like it should be fair. You know, you should be selected to come here legally and you should not be able to come here illegally. And that's just what should be fair. And it drives me bonkers that I can't have these conversations of what I feel to be righteous. And then I have to try to convince other people it's righteous, but that's the dilemma of modern politics, I guess.
That's salesmanship right there. You know, they jump to something totally random that you maybe think of. I have a VA in Colombia. She's amazing. And one of the cool ways that like we could take this unjust world and make it more just. I hired her about a year ago and she was making $6,000 a year US in her 6th year as controller for a logistics company. Like she was doing well. I hired her $11,000 a year. I bonus her, right? She works for me probably 25 hours a week. I pay her 40. And she's amazing. She's salt of the earth, awesome, kick-ass person. Costumes VA is her best friend, right? That's how I met her. Costumes with a front row dad, great guy. And they're starting an agency in Colombia. And they're going to have an entire town of VAs working for first world countries who can afford to pay them more so they can change their entire economy in this tiny country. Instead of having to come here, they're changing their world because they've been opened to possibility. And like going back to our kids, like the reality is we want them to be hungry, but we also want them to see possibilities. Like my kids go to an acting academy, right? And the people they're in school with, I had meetings with 4 of them this week. And you've got guys who work in tech who also have a philosophy podcast on the side. You've got guys who have a hedge fund who is 26% returns last year and he's pissed because he wants 40. I'm like, what? That's fantastic. Okay, here's my money. but you get these people who have just different perspectives of the world outside. And that's what I want my kids to have as an opportunity for them to experience and realize that they can be bigger than themselves. Mm-hmm. It's just awesome. You get VAs going, well, why don't we start our own companies? They're just being VAs forever. Let's leverage the wisdom in the room. And like their first call they called Costa and myself. They're like, hey, we're starting this thing. And Costa and I aren't like, oh no, what are you going to do with our work? We're like, hell yeah, how can we help?
Yeah.
Right. We want to see you succeed. We want to see you thrive, because injustice mainly happens when people aren't looking. And when you're aware, it's very challenging for injustice to happen.
I like that. I like that a lot. I want to switch gears back to business briefly, mostly because I just want some free coaching from you for myself. So in the businesses that you're still currently an owner, a chairman, whatnot, and other businesses that you've exited and handed off, what does that process look like to you? And how have you been successful at this? And now you're mentoring other people and you're going to write a book about it. What does it look like to hand off key components of the business, finding people, training them, timeline, getting them to see the vision, getting them to say, yeah, okay, cool. I'm comfortable completely running this ship and still letting Eric take 30% of the profit because it's what he's built and he's created this framework for me to make a great living. Like, what does that even look like? And the reason I ask you this is because in the mortgage world, as much as I would like to pretend we're debt consultants and we're a commodity. Mortgages are a commodity. And because we're a commodity, because we're treated like a commodity, the people that this attracts, they will ditch you as if you as their leader are a commodity, because if company B is paying 10% more, they're like, oh, okay, cool. Well, I can peel off some of Scott's referral sources. I can go work over here. He's made it look really easy. And I'll just go make money over here and fuck this guy who trained me for the last 5 years, right? And I get it. That's just the business we work in, and I've come to accept that. And what's funny is, like, of the 5 people that have done this to me, 3 of them are no longer in the industry. 1 of them's doing mediocre and 1 of them's thriving. And so when I think about this, it's like, sometimes I want to come up with the excuse of like, well, I'm just in a business where you can't breed loyalty and you can't find your replacement and you can't hand off your book of business. But people have done it. So I know that that's just a limiting belief that I have because somebody has done it. So why not me? So I mean, just looking for some free coaching from you, and this is your area of expertise. How do you find the right people? How do you set the table? How do you identify and train? And like, how do you get to the point where you're like, this is my baby. This is the thing that I worked 5 years, 90 hours a week to build. And now I'm going to set my ego aside and I'm going to hand it off to Bill, and Bill's going to do a great job taking it over, and he's not going to screw me on the way out. It's like that's so foreign to my way of thinking that I'd love either your insight or some stories or some tall tales of how this has worked and how it's failed for you. I'm hoping it's failed at least once for you, or else I feel like a complete piece of shit. But yeah, give me some insight with that framework.
So it starts with vision. It starts with, what is your mission? What is the company really doing? Because if you're just a debt consultant, if that's all you're doing, it's what everyone does and it's nothing, right? Like it's something that many people can do and many people can be a part of and many people can create. If you go deeper, like way deeper, we live in a society where right now, I think our children will be hard pressed to buy a home unless their parents are wealthy, right?
Agree.
It will be a renter's economy in one way or another, not quoting any, potential BS stories, but like in Austin right now, if I want to rent a home in the area I want to rent a home, it's going to be $8,000 to $12,000 a month. If I want to buy the same home, it's going to be $18,000 to $25,000 a month to buy it, to own it. How is it double? Like, that's insane, right? So what is it you really do? Like, if you go deeper and deeper and deeper, layer on layer on layer, do you create opportunities for people to pass down generational wealth? Do you allow people to take their money and allow it to actually create, like my first home we bought for $93,000, we sold it for $165,000 6 years later. Our next home we paid $225,000, it's worth 1.2. Like, you start looking at how we use our money and the opportunities it creates. You create the opportunity for people to actually own a piece of land where their family can have a legacy, right? If you and I went through this exercise, it would take us about an hour, 2 hours, we would go really deep into what you actually do. And even if it's not what you're doing now, what you actually could do. You can connect people who cannot otherwise get a loan. Like when I got out my first house, I was a year into no, not even that. I was in the midst of my YouTube beginnings. I'd given up all my marketing businesses. I was destitute, probably making $10,000 a year, had some savings, no credit score. I had no social security number until I was 18 years old. Again, born at home, right? No social, no nothing. Got turned down by 7 banks. The 8th bank I walk into, this guy is a private family bank. And he goes, you seem like the kind of guy who's going to work no matter what. He paid my mortgage for me for 6 months at a time. Never let me go overdue. Honored me. I was in his wedding, right? Like at this point, we became such good friends because he saw that I would do the work. But maybe that's who you are. Maybe you find hard money for those who can't get it otherwise, right? Maybe you create the dream of a real family for someone who can't have it otherwise. Once you define what that really is, what that mission really is, then you create core values based around the worst employees you've ever had, like the people you had to fire, the people who left you that were horrible. We take all their traits, we write them down, we flip them, we define the core values of what your business is going to hire and fire based upon for life. Then we start looking at not just you, but every member of your team. What do you do that's a waste of your time every day? What do you do that you hate doing every day? How can we outsource those elements? Then we systemize everything else. We look at everything that you hired these people to do, everything they're actually doing every day. We start to build seats. Instead of having people that we try to get to do the work that we need to get done, we build the seats around what actually has to happen to the company and how. And then we start defining what that role looks like. Most companies, if you have more than 6 employees, chances are you have below 1 or 2 people who are the 20%ers. They're not doing the 80% of work, they're doing 20%, and they complain the most. So we fire where we have to. We offer great severance. We are honorable. We are ethical. And then we continue to grow based upon how can we continue our mission. Now, how do we get more mortgages signed? Not how do we create more debt, but how do we help these people find freedom, or whatever the answer ends up being. And then there's a lot more to it. Like there's a lot more frameworks and different pieces that we can play from. And I'm happy to pull up notes and all these different ideas, but we start looking at each of these people and we create a perfect member scorecard of what a perfect person in that role would be doing. A lot of the time, the team we have is the team we're comfortable with, but it's not the right team. You know, I'll tell the story of someone else first. I was at an EO event in Washington, D.C. in 2021 or 2019. I don't remember which. And Mark Moses, who runs CEO coaching, $3,000 an hour, by the way, if anyone's interested, great rates. He had pictures of this entrepreneur who had, I think it was a $3 million a year cellular business. It was like this guy surrounded by 30 of his staff. And then he showed it, the progression from 3 million to 300 million or so. And the staff grew. But the most notable thing was the only person that was the same was him. Complete churn of his staff as he got to different levels. Complete different people, complete different buy-in. And for me, I think that what I found to be really realistic is like, it's not just about the fact that you're going to need different people at different levels, but as you develop and define exactly what your mission is, it's going to resonate differently with different people. And if you don't have a clearly defined mission, you have an overblown job that you're happy to go to and make whatever you can make and keep going back to work and making more only when you work harder. And if you want to keep working harder, that's great. I don't fucking want to. I want to work harder only on things that impassion me. And if you're willing to work harder just to make a little extra money, what a boring ass life you have. Sorry, that's harsh, but it's the truth. Like if that's all that inspires you to work hard, I will never work hard for money. But if I can work hard to make a bigger impact in the world, inspire more people to do more cool shit and overcome their fears and be passionate about who they are, and be present with who they're meant to be, and be with their families and do cool things and like things that actually make a difference long-term for society, that impassions me way more than money.
You know, I'm listening to you talk, and in some ways it fires me up. And in some ways, I'm going back to something you said an hour and a half ago about you will get burnt out and how quickly you can come back from that burnout. And as I'm thinking to myself specifically about my mortgage business, I'm just thinking, am I to the point where I am too burnt out to do the job passionately? And all I can think about in the stuff that you were just saying is the case study of your guy that you mentioned that you became really good friends with that helped you with that first mortgage. I have countless stories, and it'll go something like this, right? Client comes to me when they're in really bad shape. We ram a square peg into a round hole to get these people 10 years ago into a $400,000 house in Eagle Rock, California, which for years was the fastest growing market on Redfin. You know, it was like seeing double-digit appreciations for like 10 years straight. And, 6 years later, they come back and they're like, hey, Scott, man, you killed it for us. The only reason we own this house is because of you. We got it for $400,000. We're going to sell it for $900,000. We're going to go put $500,000 on our dream house. Help us out. Educate us. We go through the whole process over again. We cram a round peg into a square hole again because now they're trying to buy the $1.7 million house with $500,000 down. And it's the same set of problems, just with an extra zero. And at the 11th hour, they're like, man, Scott, you changed our life. And, B of A is 0.1% lower. And that's $92 a month, which over 30 years is $35,000. I got to do what's best for my family, so we're going to go with them. And I'm like, you motherfucker. I'm like, you have $500,000 of tax-free money because of the package that we were able to put together. And now I've been coaching you for the last 6 months on how to get your finances in order so you can sell and you can buy and you can be in a place. And we did the fully underwritten approval, and I went to bat. And one of the reasons you got your offer accepted is because I know the listing agent and they trust me when I say that this deal is going to close. And then you ditch me at the 11th hour for some dipshit who was a teller 5 months ago, and now they're a loan officer at Bank of America. They could not have figured out a way to get you into this house had I not set everything up. And you're going to ditch me over $92 a month? And it's like, this is just common for the mortgage industry. And I'm just thinking to myself as you're talking, has this just happened too many times that I'm like jaded now? And I don't know if I can approach the work with the same passion that I did 10 years ago. And I don't know if I can come back from that.
I have an answer. Transparency. It sucks. We have people who are training just under $4,000 to learn to fly. The last numbers I saw was less than 2% profit because we pay our instructors a living wage. I know it doesn't sit with your sensibilities, as a conservative.
No, you're a business owner. You do whatever you want. If you told me you were losing money so that you could have an ESOP and your employees are better taken care of, I'm like, awesome. That's all on you. That's admirable. Now, if the government came in and told you to do that, I would be like literally up in arms.
I would like that. I appreciate your arms. They're quite strong. That said, what we tell our students and what we say, and I think it's really important because there are hundreds of what I call faux dealers in the US. 11 years ago when I started this company, the nearest competitor I have was much like me. I was working out of my garage, just me. I had a paramotor and a couple of parts. That's still to this day the majority of our competitors. Versus we have over 20 employees, I guess 24 employees. We have a full-time maintenance department, not one person, department. We have millions in inventory of every part you could possibly need from any paramotor you've ever bought from us. Unless the manufacturer stops selling to us because they have a grievance that we don't sell their product anymore, we have it in stock. We've worked to professionalize the industry, and we're really honest with our mission. Like, look, this flying thing is life-changing, but if you don't keep doing it, it was just 2 weeks you spent and a bunch of money that did nothing for you, right? It was a cool experience. It was like, go for a wine painting experience instead, please. This is not for you. We're not the place you go if you don't want this to change your life. And I email every single person the day after they said, well, I don't email them. My VA emails them. Our list of core values, what we believe in, how we're going to treat them. And if we ever screw them over, my cell phone number is at the end of that email. Do you know how many phone calls I've received since I started doing that?
0.
Almost 2 years now, 0. Nobody calls me because we follow through on our word. So this is me playing, I don't know your industry, right? But if I were in your position and you had Family Jones call you and say, you did this amazing thing for us, First, they'd already have received word from me every year on the anniversary of the closing about how grateful you were that this worked out, letting them know what's going on, like a Christmas letter, but for your client, that every year they get an update from their freaking loan officer about other things you're closing in the area and just how grateful you are that their story is a part of your story and that is part of the success. And that's how you're able to take your family to Africa this year. That's how you're able to do this cool thing. And guess what? You got a broken leg, but you still got your brown belt, like whatever it is, right? Keep them apprised of your life. You cared about them. They care about you. Keep caring about them, right? And then when they come to you and they have this idea of the next thing they want to do, you tell them, look, in the past, I've worked my ass off for 6 months and lost deals to Bank of America, who, by the way, is an evil corporation who will sell your loan to someone else who might just keep charging you fees. I actually heard this story yesterday. No bullshit. Yesterday, the story was told to me by one of my clients. He was trying to help a woman buy her house because it was going to foreclosure because her loan had been sold. And the company that bought the loan wouldn't take her money out of escrow. She made all of her payments. They didn't take the money out of escrow. So they took her house because it was undervalued. They could sell it for a lot more. Could she fight it and win? Yes. Does she have the $400,000 in legal fees to do it? No. Right? So the man keeps winning. So you tell that story. You be honest about your experience. Like, I help these people. I'm only willing to help you if you either sign this document or you pay this fee. If you don't get your mortgage through me, it'll be $35,000. I'm going to give you financial consulting. You have to be careful. You have a lot more legalities than I do in my industry, right? But like, why not be open, be honest, be vulnerable? Tell them how burned you are. Tell them how jilted you feel, how you feel as if you're the lover who gets turned away at the altar because you see someone else in the lineup, right? You have this opportunity. You want to go to bat. You want to help them get their finances in order. But if you get fucked by this, remember, you're telling them your story. You're staying in contact year after year. They already know about your daughter. This is a line I've actually used. I use it in jest because my kids aren't actually hungry, but they're very skinny. So I tell my clients, I'm like, hey, look at how skinny my kids are. Do you want them to eat? Yes, it might cost you $1,500 more to buy it from us, the company with millions of dollars in inventory, with on-site staff ready to support you anytime you need it, with loaner equipment that no one else in the industry has, with more care for you than anyone else will have. The number one thing that stands out about Aviator over every other paramotor business in the world is that we care more about our clients. We care more about our students. We're going to work harder for them, period. And if you can care more than your competitors, 35 grand over the next 20 years sounds like a lot. It's not. You, like any industry where you give the shit the most, you win. That's what built a 7-8 figure empire for me, is caring, actually being empathetic and being vulnerable and honest. When I came into my industry, it was two different brands who were just talking shit about each other. YouTube video. This one's bad. This one's bad. This one's bad. This one's bad. I came in the scene. I made a shitload of videos and I never said anything was bad. I just said, everyone has different opinions. This is what I like right now. This is what's working for me. Didn't have an opinion. Didn't try to polarize. Just tried to care. And it worked.
I love that. I got to tell you,
because I'm done talking.
I love that. I love that. I got to tell you one funny story that happened to a coaching client of mine. He gets this call from a realtor who we'll just say is Sean Penn looks like Ronald Reagan compared to this realtor. I mean, her social media is every progressive talking point you can possibly imagine. And she tells him, she's like, I have my loan at Wells Fargo. They have paid $100 million fine after $100 million fine because they're ripping off veterans and they're ripping off these people. And, they're the number one financer on the Keystone pipeline coming from Canada to the Bay. That's against my moral beliefs. No way, no how am I doing business with Wells Fargo. Can you please find me an end investor for my loan that is not politically associated? I don't need them to be progressive, but I just can't have them be criminals, So, okay, cool. So he does a shit ton of research. Like literally this consumed his life for a couple days. And he comes back and he's like, oh, hey, okay, I found this company. They're called Redwood. They are a hedge fund that invests in mortgages. They're actually still family run. They're very apolitical. They only do mortgages. They don't have a political action campaign. They are a great lender. And here's the rate. Let's get started with the application. Cool. Sends her the application, sends her all the paperwork. And a couple days, doesn't hear from her. Calls her back and is like, hey, are we getting started or what? Like, rates are kind of moving against us. I got to get you locked in. She's like, well, you know, that rate you quoted me, Wells Fargo, I called them back and they were a quarter cheaper, so I went with them. It's like, oh, so every possible moral you have was worth 0.25% on $1 million, which is about $160 a month. So all of your ethics, we have now been able to solidify into a dollar amount. It's $160 a month is where your line is for being ethical or not ethical. Neither of us have ever worked with that lady again. And I'm just like, it's just pathetic, right? And it's like, I get it. It's people's money. They can do with what they want. But it's just, I mean, that's how dramatic the industry is when you work in an industry that's been commoditized. And I'm so jealous of financial planners because we're about, how old are you, Eric?
38.
38. Okay, so I'm 44. So you probably remember this. Ancient. You probably remember this. Like when we were a kid, Northwestern Mutual or Prudential, they would have advertisements where they would be like, our Magellan fund returned 7.7% a year for, and now all financial planner commercials, they look like Viagra ads, right? There's nothing about the numbers. There's nothing about the rate of return. It's like all of them conspired together and like, let's talk about safety and security and retiring with wealth, but we're not going to talk about anything with rates, where mortgage companies went the exact opposite way. And the only thing we advertise is rates. And so like we did it to ourselves. Because I mean, really the financial world, it should be a commoditized like, hey, what did you return versus what did you return? What's your risk profile? You know, what's your alpha? What's your beta? And let's just move forward, right? It should be that easy. But they were really smart about 20, 30 years ago. They switched to like this comfort and security model of advertising. And I'm like, man, the mortgage industry desperately needs an overhaul to do something similar or follow your advice and do all the things that you just said. So thank you for the free coaching in both sales and in, you know, finding my succession plan maybe.
Well, it's finding the right people who you are a commodity, but if you're the commodity that cares the most, you're the commodity that actually is human. Like, dude, my loan officer for my house in Florida, I know she's a female. I know she's in Tampa. I know she got me a 0 down on a 30-year note with a good rate. I could not tell you anything else about her. I couldn't tell you her name. We never met face to face. We never met on Zoom. We never had any interaction aside from business. I'm never recommending her to someone else because I don't care about her. No offense if you're listening.
Yeah.
You did a great job at your job, but like, what else does that mean to me? Like, right. It's like, okay, you know, if you can take a commodity and give it a personality and make it matter, you can teach people to sell. You can teach people to share themselves. You can teach a team to be the loan officer team that cares the most. And that can go way beyond you. That can extend beyond your existence in the business because it's your mission. It's making something impersonal personal. It's taking something that people look at as, I can get the best rate, and going, I'd rather spend an extra percent, you know, an extra $200,000. My next loan's probably gonna be 3.5 to 5 million, right? If I have to spend an extra percent to make it easy, so I can DocuSign instead of sitting there and signing freaking 700 reams of paper to be able to, like, if I could, I was talking about this with a bunch of FRD realtors recently. You may, but actually I think you were in the room. It's like, if I could buy a house from a realtor who will get my driver's license changed, my license plates changed, that's all legal in Texas. They have mobile DMVs, right? If I can have them also sign me up for the pool cleaner that they like, that they get a commission from. Sign me up for the lawn crew that you like, that you get a commission from. So I don't have to think. I buy a house from you because you tell me this is the best school district or it's close to my kid's private school, and you do all this groundwork for me. Hell yeah, I'm paying your full commission. I'm not asking for a discount.
Right.
You just made my life so much easier in every way. Oh, and you have movers that can come get my pod and empty it into my house. And you have an interior designer that you get a commission from, that you promote, and that you get them to come in and set up all my art in a new way, that in a new house, because it's all art from my old house. I don't know if it'll work or not. My furniture's from an old house. But now it's all done for me. You become that conduit that makes life simpler for people who value time and efficiency, which, by the way, is almost everyone.
Right.
There's some who genuinely don't, and those just aren't your clients. Charge an extra percent. Don't even charge a percent of the mortgage. Charge a convenience fee. Yeah, we're 4.35, just like Wells Fargo, but we do charge a 1% convenience fee because we're going to not only build out your financial background to make sure that you get approved for this loan, we're also going to follow up with you for the next 5 years to make sure you're ready for the next one. And we're going to do all these other little tiny services that aren't hard to do. You open the fucking Yellow Pages or Google these days, and you go find a lawn crew with 35 5-star reviews that's in the neighborhood, and you just say, hey, if you take care of this person, I'm putting my reputation on the line and I want 10%. Now you have an ongoing, consistent revenue model that actually makes money for you way beyond the close of a freaking mortgage. You're serving people for life until they cancel because their son starts a lawn crew, right? That's what it is. You're changing the paradigm of the market. And when you shift the market, you shift the expectations. It might take a generation, it might take two, but when you are the one that cares the most and you do the most, people pay attention.
I love that, man. That's a good place to end our formal interview. But I always end mic drop. We got to get like a mic drop sound, bam, like a wah wah wah. Anyway, I always end with two questions, and I feel like you and I could talk for hours and hours. As a matter of fact, we have before. I feel like you and I could talk for hours and hours. We didn't go into family. We didn't go to your wife. We didn't go to my wife. We could talk for hours. We got to do like 7 more of these podcasts. But I always like to end on this question, which is, we're filming this in January of 2024. We're actually ahead of schedule, which is nice. So this will probably
February,
come out.
by the way.
Oh, it is February. Oh, yes, it is February. Yes. New month. It is February. This will come out sometime in March. So question number 1, what are you looking most forward to in 2024? Question number 2, favorite movie and why? Because I love leading with that. And because you're you, I'm going to add a third question. The race cars, the race bikes, the planes, the plane crashes, the paramotoring. What's like the craziest, riskiest thing you feel you've ever done where it's like, wife would not be happy if she saw the game tape on that one? So those 3 questions, man. What are you most looking forward to in 2024? Favorite movie and why? And the craziest thing that Eric has done in his life that might scare the shit out of his wife and kids if they saw a video of that.
I'm going to break all the rules. Thing I'm most looking forward to, I'm living it right now. Like I'm in a new community, in a new town with kids who are in school for the first time. They were homeschooled until they were 8, 10, and 12, watching them build friendships. My daughter's having a birthday party here tomorrow, her 9th birthday. She's having a baked potato bar, which that's the thing I made up, but she's very excited. Watching them thrive has been thrilling, like genuinely thrilling. Favorite movie? I don't have one. I don't actually have a favorite movie. I have movies I'm willing to watch over and over again on repeat. And there's 3. Braveheart, Italian Job. I just lost the third. Boondock Saints. Those 3 movies I would literally watch on loop because there's so many elements I just think are amazing. Italian Job is not the best movie, but it was at a formative time in my life where it was just enough love of women and cars that it just all fit together.
Put Mini Coopers on the map.
Exactly, dude. I've owned 2 Mini Coopers because of that movie.
Me too.
Have you? That's awesome. So absolutely love those, including the original Mini Cooper, which my friend owned, but I borrowed, and we put it. I didn't go to college, but my ex did. We put his Mini Cooper on the stage in the concert hall, in the dean's office, on top of the windows of the cafeteria. It was only 800 pounds, so like 6 guys could move this thing anywhere. It's fantastic. And then the third question was,
craziest thing you've done that the family would not be happy if they saw the game tape on that one.
So there's a great question that I've been asked at a couple of different masterminds. If I really knew you, I'd know what. People don't believe this, but I'm probably the most risk-adverse person you know. I'm the most cautious, careful, slowly progressing, incredibly danger-averse person. I do crazy things, but I work my way up to them very, very carefully. So to answer your question, again, breaking the rules, I would say I married a redhead. So I can't say piss her off, but that was the danger zone.
All right, but you have paramotored. What's the fastest you've ever driven a motorcycle?
On a racetrack, 193.
And the fastest you've ever driven a car?
189.
And getting married is the biggest risk you've ever taken?
100%. And I say that in the most incredible amount of love for my wife, because it is the number one thing that can ruin your life if you go into it wrong or if you have the wrong partner. And I married someone who we both had a ton of trauma to work through, and it was the hardest work of my life, but now it's the most rewarding, and I can't be more grateful for it. Like, just, dude, Awesome. Awesome to have a great partner.
That's the way to end it, man. Thanks for being on.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. And to everybody out there, if you need to find me, you have questions, my schedule is pretty open. So feel free to message me LinkedIn, wherever. I'm happy to have those messages from your crew, brother.
And you're just at Eric Farewell, Farewell, and all the places, Instagram and all that stuff, right?
All the places. Yes, sir.
Perfect, man.